Welcome to Cybersecurity Refined and Feral, where refinement meets chaos in the digital world. We invite you to join your co-hosts Candy Alexander and Cailin Sullivan in another open conversation on topics related to cybersecurity.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Cailin Sullivan, one of your co-hosts of Cybersecurity Refined and Feral.
And I'm Candy Alexander, the other co-host. Today we're joined by Jon Oltsik. And according to your LinkedIn page, Jon, you're semi-retired. So we want to find out a little bit about that. But for the audience's purposes, Jon and I had met, seems like a million years ago. And we've always stayed in touch. Today's topic is about the cybersecurity profession. Jon and I initiated a project a few years ago. One of the conversations we had was like, what the heck is going on with the profession? It's like all over the place. There's nobody that has a really good pulse on the mindset of a cybersecurity professional. We had a lot of research surveys on like salaries and things like that, but not really on how cyber security professionals felt and think and all of that from, again, the voice of the profession. So Jon was in a wonderful position to help us with that research. And that was in the capacity when I was with ISSA and Jon was with ESG. So Jon, if you would, please let us know a little bit about who Jon is and what the heck you've been up to since you're semi-retired.
Sure,
now.
And thanks, Candy and Cailin. Nice to see you. So I started the cybersecurity practice at ESG in 2003 as an analyst, and I retired from ESG in 2024, early 2024. So over 20 years of covering the cybersecurity market. I met a multitude of interesting and really hands-on people during that time frame, from CISOs to practitioners to hackers to Candy. And it's great to be here. What I'm doing now, as I'm semi-retired, I'm still doing a little bit of analyst type work. I'm on several boards of advisors. I'm still involved in CISO communities, and I'm pleased to say I will be at the RSA conference. And then I've got a really fun project that I'm about to kick off, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. So stay tuned for that too.
Well, we'll have to have you back. So when you do kick that project off, we can maybe find out a little bit more. You
Okay.
Definitely piqued my interest there. All right. So to get started, why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of what the heck this research study we're talking about is? For example, how to get started. I mean, what does it cover? And then we can get into some of the details.
So the name of the research project is The Life and Times of Cybersecurity Professionals. The one that's published and available for free, I should say, on the ESG and the ISSA website is volume 7. So we've done it 7 times over the last, let's say, 9 or 10 years. As Candy said, we wanted to get into the mindset of cybersecurity professionals. So we asked them about their careers. We asked them about their satisfaction, what makes them satisfied in their job, what makes them unsatisfied or dissatisfied with their job. We asked them about the impact of the cybersecurity skill shortage. We asked them about cybersecurity leadership. We asked them about their relationships with other areas of the company, primarily the business management area and the IT area. So we evolved it over time. We tended to do a few different questions each year, but generally we stuck to the knitting, and we had 7 years of really tracking, like I say, the mindset of the cybersecurity professional.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And just as a reminder, we will put a link to the ISSA page where you can download that ebook, actually. So I'll start the questions with, again, you mentioned we've done this for several times before. I've always found it interesting that, things never really changed, which was a bad thing, right? Usually it's a good thing because people hate change, but in this case, it was a bad thing. But since I wasn't involved in this latest publication or rendition of the study, I have to ask, what was the most surprising response in the report that you noted from this past year?
Wow, immediately putting me on the spot. Um, I would say that, um, and I'm trying to think through all of the research, all of the data points, um, but
Right.
uh, and this isn't so surprising, but it's consistent, and that is the resilience of the cybersecurity professional. It is not an easy job. We know that there are stresses, long hours. We know that that leads to burnout. We know that that can lead to social
Mhm.
anxiety or substance abuse and things like that. But it really is a morality battle between people who are fighting the good fight and defending their organizations against who they perceive to be malicious actors. And we know what makes them happy. We know what makes them dissatisfied, as I said. But it's really, I mean, you'd think that people would just start a kind of walk away from the profession if it were that bad. But people
Mhm.
don't do that. They have a dedication, and certainly some change roles and positions, but there's a dedication there that's
Yes.
quite admirable.
Well, I have, to be honest, though, I mean, and this is like not any formal, research in this by any means, but I've noticed a lot starting to be vocal about wanting to step away. Whether they do or don't is one thing, but I think it's the toll is starting to pile up to a breaking point, and that's
Yes.
terrifying. So I hope, I hope
Well,
something happens. Don't know what.
go ahead.
I almost wonder if that has to do with the age of people in the
Yeah,
profession.
Kaylin, that's exactly where I was going to go, is that you have people aging out.
Yeah.
And what's really troubling, to your
Hmm.
point, Candy,
Mhm.
is the exit of very qualified CISOs. And so an operational CISO, they could go work for a vendor and be a field CISO. They could become a
Right.
virtual CISO, or they could retire. And the position is changing. And if you've put that much into it and you've become a successful CISO, um, that's an achievement. And I'm not sure that the next generation of CISOs is out there and ready and available to the degree that we need. So you're right. That's a troubling pattern.
Yeah. Caleb, are you going to say something? Add more to that?
Um, I think that kind of speaks to the importance of mentorship programs.
Hmm.
Like even
Yes.
if somebody you find like somebody my age, not to be, talking about age differences, but even if somebody is like retired or semi-retired, if you still have that mentorship, that will help a lot with people coming in and moving up in their careers in the profession, being able to go to somebody for advice that has that wealth of knowledge.
We actually had that in the
Yeah, I was
survey,
thinking the
didn't we,
same thing.
John?
So when we asked cybersecurity
Yeah.
professionals what are the aspects of their job that are most satisfying, and that was one of them, Kaylin. That was the ability to learn from
Mm.
experienced professionals was always one of the top three or four um, attributes that they sought. And obviously there was money, but the other ones were things like, well, the business's commitment to cybersecurity. So no one wants to work. And Candy, you
Yeah.
remember the days when we used to say, the business said, we don't need good security, we need good enough security. Well, no one wants to work at that place anymore. And they want
Right.
the
Right.
opportunity to learn from the best. So you're absolutely right that a mentorship program, if you want to become a cybersecurity center of excellence, if you want to recruit and retain the best talent, that's one of the attributes or one of the prerequisites that you should try to achieve.
So let's explore that a little more, because I think mentorship has always been a challenge for me, both as a mentor and a mentee. And, like, I think the expectation traditionally has, and I've had this happen to me, I'd like do a session, a presentation somewhere, and people come up after and talk with you. And numerous times I have people say, "Hey, you want to be my mentor?" It's like, making friends on the playground. Hey, want to be my best friend? It doesn't happen that way. And I think as we grow and morph as a profession, that mentor mentee relationship has changed as well. It's not traditional. And I've often said as well, even no matter where I am in my career, I've always had mentors. And it wasn't one mentor, it was multiple, depending on the subject matter, if you will. So um, I think we still haven't really figured out that whole mentorship type of relationship, and it has to be organic. Like, again, the whole thing we came up with this show is that Cailin and I would talk once a week because I'm in a different state than her, and we'd have like mom daughter date night. We'd FaceTime and talk, and of course both being in the profession, we gravitate to work. And so I naturally have become her mentor, but she has been my mentor as well, right? On certain topics to stay, contemporary or, current, if you will. But I think we as a profession, as a society, really need to step back and look at how to work those relationships for guiding it and guiding each other through, and maybe not so much of a formal mentorship. What are your
I think
thoughts
you're
there?
right. I think we have to be flexible in what we consider a mentorship, maybe definitional changes. So, for instance, Cailin, I've presented with your mom lots of times, and she'll often say, I worked at Digital Equipment Corporation. Well, DEC was a huge, wildly successful company, but that was like 30, almost 40 years ago. And so when we do that and we talk to
Nice.
people your age, Cailin, they'll say, who? And so we have to be open
Yeah.
minded. So, as
Right.
the more senior people, we have to communicate with people of your generation and say, how do you learn? How do you communicate? What are the channels
Yeah.
you use? Is it a video orientation? Is it a reading orientation? We have to know these things and to be helpful. But I also will say that, and Candy, I've seen people ask you this and they ask me this too. They say, how do I get into this profession? And we know, and Cailin, you can speak from experience, it's really hard for entry level people to get a
Hmm.
cybersecurity job, despite the fact that there's a global cybersecurity shortage. So, what can you do? The thing I always tell them, and this really comes out in our research every year, is go join some professional organization. And in doing so, and it could be ISSA, it could be a local one, it could be based on a technology, whatever. But in doing so, you're going to meet
Hmm.
people with experience and with similar aspirations and talk to them, figure out what makes them tick. And in that way, you will learn and you will extend your network. And so that's, as a starting point, I'd say that's pretty good. It's not quite a mentorship, but it's a start.
Yeah. Well, I think it organically happens. And of course, I've got my own little case study there named Cailin. It's like I, of course, grew up in ISSA and learned a lot of things and attained a lot of skills that are not necessarily taught anywhere, like leadership, skills, what you needed to be a leader when you become a chapter president or be on the board of directors of your local chapter, volunteerism and all that. And so Cailin has followed in my footsteps. She's now the chapter president of the New England chapter. But when that happens, you naturally build rapport with others in the organization, like you said, right, John? And let's face it, we as professionals, I've said this a million times, we just want to give back. We just want to, make the world a better place. So when we see somebody younger than us who is willing to put in the work, really willing to listen to, our stories and apply them, I mean, that's gold to us, as, the more seasoned, shall I say, professionals. So I hope that, a lot of the younger folks out there, hear these words, that social aspect of the profession is crucial.
I've actually had a couple people reach out to me, connect with me that are trying to get into cyber, and that's one of the first things I always suggest is like the network for networking specifically, joining a professional org. Um, I for the longest time was like, yeah, whatever, ma, whatever. Yep, sounds good. One ear and out the other. Just because that's my mom. Um, but it's definitely now that I've been on the board for 2 years, it's definitely given me opportunities to do public speaking, try and herd cats with the board, volunteer position. Everybody's got their own lives and their own time trying to get goals accomplished. So, all sorts of valuable skills that I don't have access to in my job currently. Um, so, yeah, I'd have to agree
And
with that
just to add to that,
100%.
uh, if your goal is to be a CISO, then there are other skills you need to develop besides technical skills. And so a lot of people come into
Yeah.
cybersecurity as technicians, heads down. They like to look at packets. They like to reverse engineer malware, and that's fine. And you can certainly build a great career there. But if your aspiration is to be a CISO, then it's good to develop those other skills, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah. You would I would even argue that as an entry or mid-level professional, that's yes, those tech skills are really important. But at some point, I hate to say this, but at some point you have to pick your head up and talk to others in your team and in your boss and whatnot. And you really need to focus on sharpening those communication skills because every job posting you look at, the other skill bucket, good
Yes.
communication and presentation skills, no matter
And
what it
remember
is.
that
So,
as a
yeah.
cybersecurity professional, reporting is a big component of that job because someone who you report to needs to understand what you're seeing. And AI is not going to do it alone. So it really is important to be able to communicate, to write, to
Wow.
speak convincingly.
Absolutely. Well, for anybody who's played with AI, it is biased. It does hallucinate. I've had so many arguments with pick your favorite model. So you do need to have your basic knowledge, and more importantly, when it comes to the communication skills, and reporting those security risks, right? You need to be able to do it in business terms because we still are struggling. And John, I'm sure there's data points in that research. We're still struggling on how to communicate to the business.
Hmm.
If we go in there and say, well, I need an increase of budget because, we need, pick a technology, you're going to get the deer in the headlight look. And so rather than do that, we need to figure out how to put it in business terms. And perhaps, some of those AI models will help, when you can say, please put this in business terms. Perhaps that will help, but don't necessarily rely on that, right?
Very true.
Yeah, when I was looking at the report, in the top stressful aspects of the profession, number 3 was finding out about IT initiatives and projects that were started by other teams, and that directly points to communication issues between the security IT department and the rest of the biz.
Yes, and remember, what was it? What was the name of it? Oh, Shadow IT a few years ago. Well, now we're in an age of Shadow AI, which is even scarier because it's doing things with your data that you may not be aware of or that you may not want. And so understanding what other groups within the organization are doing and being able to build the appropriate threat models, controls, and monitoring is critical. And Candy, I'm sure you have long and arduous stories about how many times you found out about things that were happening after the fact that were tremendous risks.
Absolutely. It's I have a lot of war stories, and actually one of the campaigns I'm going to be working on really soon is talking about, from the cloud perspective, and then we will move into the AI. And I'm doing a lot of work with the Cloud Security Alliance, AI research groups, trying to bring that voice of business and security executive to the table, because I think that's another component of it, right? You talk about communications, we need to make sure that we don't just lock up the tech guys and put them in girls and put them in a lab somewhere and just throw them Mountain Dew and Twinkies. We need to get in there, and it needs to be really flushed out, and that's borrowing from like agile development and those others that you storyboard it, right, and look at it from the different perspectives, and that's the way we need to work. And then when we look at it from the AI, shadow AI perspective, for anybody who really believes that there isn't shadow AI going on, they're absolutely kidding themselves. You can put controls around it all day long, but you really need to educate. That goes back to another thing we talked about in the report, and the importance of security awareness and education, and making sure users understand those risks.
Yeah, that has to
right?
be, and we've talked about this all the time. It's critical, and it's got to be a real program. So it is not a checkbox exercise. Even though there are regulations that require it, that's not the goal. They require it for a reason, and that is to educate users. And just like cybersecurity professionals who have to update their education constantly, that's important for awareness training too. Now, the best way I've seen this done is some kind of gamification or some kind of at least rewards for people so that they're challenged, so that they buy in, they understand, and then they're into the game of it. They want to succeed because people like to
Right.
succeed. But that helps with education and behavior.
Right. It's funny because I remember, speaking of digital, I was responsible for security awareness for the company, and we're talking like 130,000 people worldwide, including engineers. And so you might as well, like, from a challenge factor, make it 500,000, because engineers are really hard to get them interested in security awareness. And so I remember the web just came out, right? World Wide Web. And so we had put up all our security policies on the internal website. And so in order to get them to read the policies, I made it a treasure hunt. And so whoever, was able to supply the right clues from the treasure hunt, they were put into a drawing for a coffee mug. And you would not believe the competition going on with the engineers, because they all wanted a silly security mug. So that gamification, stumbled on that accidentally, kind of, sort of, and now it is like the biggest thing in regards to security awareness. So it's just funny to see how things evolve, I guess.
Even us, for this past annual training, I tried to turn it into a competition. where it like came down to like two people between like we split our training between engineers and non-engineers. The engineers have additional security awareness training that's job specific. But I was like, I'm gonna have a special treat for all of you guys who win Hamar retreat, and I am so excited to give out this prize to all these people. I'm not gonna spoil anything because I think this is going to be published before we go on the retreat, but I know everybody's going to love it. But it's, something small, but it motivates. It's great. It's a lot of fun. You have to
Yeah,
have
there's
fun with it.
psychology studies about this, that it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be a lot of money or some valuable thing. It's just that people get motivated to not only compete, but when you win, it feels
Mm.
good and you can show off. And so people are like that. And to the extent you can make cybersecurity awareness training and get that spirit going, I think is worthwhile. I agree. Engineers are tougher.
Mm.
I think there's a little bit more carrot and stick there, but that's it. But I think the general
Right.
knowledge worker, yeah, I think you can use the gamification quite well.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears just slightly. So I'm looking at my notes here, and I also noted that there's a topic of difficulty in measuring cybersecurity effectiveness. And so I believe that was covered in the report this year or last year. What are your thoughts in regards to that challenge? Like, generally speaking, what do you think the challenge is? And is it the content? Is it the messaging? Is it the presentation? Is it the audience? I mean, are we just not defining the right metrics, the critical, yeah, easy for me to say, critical success factors? I mean, or all the above? What are
Uh,
your thoughts on that,
I think
John?
we've had historical problems there where cybersecurity was always looked at as a cost center. I think to some
Mm-hmm.
extent, the bad guys have done us a favor with things like ransomware, where the results of ransomware in attacks like Change Healthcare or the pipeline. I forget the name of it, but the pipeline a couple of years ago. So, I mean,
Colonial?
those are devastating business disruptions. And so we
Yes.
haven't had to justify security as much as we have in the past, but we still do. We still have to talk about risk metrics. How can we decrease or mitigate cyber risk? What will that lead to in terms of uptime and business performance? And you mentioned it before, is
Mm-hmm.
like it's important that security people think like business people. So there's cost, there's risk mitigation, there's risk transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a whole department and there's a whole audit committee on any board that is responsible for that. And now the SEC demands that boards have cybersecurity knowledge. Well, let's marry the two. Let's have cybersecurity knowledge, but business centric risk management. And I think we will achieve our goals. There's no specific metric, and every company is different, as you know. But I'd say that's the overall
Yeah.
mindset that I'm seeing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do
Well, it's
you
interesting.
think
Oh, go ahead.
we were talking about like the technical CISOs? Do you think that if the profession was to move more into a generalist type CISO, that would change?
Yeah, I do. And I see that happening. There are programs like I
Hmm.
attended one at Brown University. I visited them. I didn't take the certification, but that are really trying to educate a new kind of CISO. There is this notion of a
Yeah.
BISO that some people in the industry have laughed at. That's really a CISO, but maybe not at a business unit level. So I think that does
Yeah.
work, Cailin, but it has to be complemented with
Mm-hmm.
someone who has the deep technical chops.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I thought maybe
Yeah.
that role would bifurcate, that you'd have a chief business security officer and a chief technical security officer. those are titles that you can play with, but like a senior VP or senior security architect might serve the role on the technical side. And then the most successful
Yeah.
CISOs I know have the business or have the technical experience, but they've developed themselves into strong business people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And that's why I remember that debate. And I was like so against, let's not mess with the CISO. We have an identity crisis as it is, as CISOs, and let's not really confuse it. But I do see the value of calling somebody a BISO, like in a large global corporation. Absolutely. To be a CISO for that business unit. However, I think we should all strive, those who want to be security executives, CISOs, that you do need to have, and let me make that clear, you do need to have that baseline technical knowledge, and then you need to complement that with the business acumen. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in meetings and and the tech guys are trying to BS me, and it's like, no, I know that not to be true or whatever. So you need to be able to, step up to the plate and say, absolutely, I'm calling the BS right now. So you need that basis. We are technologists, but unlike other like CIO, CTO, we really, I think more so need to be that liaison. We need to speak both languages. You need to speak the technology and you need to speak the business because we need to marry that. And a lot of times, again, it's more than what the CTO will do or the CIO because it's almost like they're expected to not be able to, talk the business language. But as an example, recently, I worked with a client and they were going through a SOC 2 type 2. And it's like, well, they put on the slides for the board that, we're doing this SOC 2 type 2 and, here's all the facts. And it's like, they don't want to hear that. That means nothing to them. I said, what they want to hear is that, you have a SOC 2 type 2 project that you're going for the SOC 2. And here's why you're going to enable sales. You're a sales enabler now rather than a cost center, like you mentioned before, John. And so I think we, again, as CISOs, need to be more salesy, need to know that marketing angle and understand the business strategy and goals and visions of the organization to fully support it.
Couldn't agree more.
Ay, ay, ay. If it was only that easy, right? We would all do it. So let's dive a little deeper into the and actually Cailin and I did an episode on this on the work-life balance or life-work balance. What did you see in the research? I know it's been an issue. Has it increased over the years, or are we staying the same? What are your thoughts
The
on that?
research suggests that it's pretty consistent. That one of the reasons people are dissatisfied with a cybersecurity career is the compromise they're making on their life-work balance. And one of the primary reasons why they leave the profession or contemplate leaving the profession is the amount of time that it takes to be a cybersecurity professional and how that takes away from your home life. So yeah, I don't know what we can do to improve that, but I think that CISOs should be aware of that. And part of your job as a manager is making sure your people are happy. And if they're not happy, you need to understand why. And if you can address it, then address it.
Yeah.
So I know that's a simplistic way to look at it, but it's absolutely essential. If your people are burnt out, you're in trouble. And you have to figure out why they're burnt out.
Yeah.
And if that means going to the business people and saying, look, we need to increase staff, or we need to offload some of this work to a third-party provider, that should be part of your ongoing strategic decision making as a CISO.
But it's not just the CISO either. Because I remember even being like an InfoSec manager or an analyst, you
Yes.
are on call. If it hits the fan, it's all hands on deck, and that's very stressful to work
Yes,
in
and
that
that's
environment.
I meant to suggest that it's really the
Okay.
organization. Clearly, CISOs are
Yes.
burnt out as well, or get burnt out in certain
Yeah,
situations. Maybe one of the reasons why they change jobs so much. But as a CISO, you should be monitoring your staff for those very reasons.
I agree. It's almost like
It's a first
firefighters
responder
and
job.
law
You're absolutely
enforcement.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that thankfully the profession as a whole, our community, is really starting to recognize that and trying to, like self help or help each other through the community by saying it's okay to say, I need to step away. I need, some type of techniques to help release that stress, whether it's exercise, whether it's and this is one of the conversations that Caitlin and I would talk about. It's generational as well, right? Like my generation, you work, 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 got to be a type A. Even if you're not a type A, you got to be a type A to get ahead. So she would say, Mom, block your calendar out. And that's fine. I can do that all day long, but where am I at lunch? I'm still here at the desk. So it's now really consciously scheduling in instead of blocking my calendar, go for a walk outside.
Mhm.
Even if it's just to take, a couple of deep breaths of fresh air. So I think, we really collectively as a community need to, make each other aware of that stress and look at some of those health, wealth benefits, that we have going on. And I know when I was president of ISSA, we had the CISO forum, and we would really work on getting a wellness speaker in to talk about some techniques. But I think perhaps, John, when we were in our 30s or whatever, organizations did that, right? They would bring in wellness programs, and that kind of went away with reduction of spending and everything else. But I think it's time for us to start talking about that to have it be a benefit. And I know
Yeah,
some have,
larger
right?
organizations have that and support their people. But I will say this though: a lot of what we're talking about is the stress of responding to incidents and the
Yeah.
mitigation or remediation that follows that. Um, I have seen a change in the last few years where the pendulum has swung a little bit more toward a focus on risk management and threat prevention. And I
Hmm.
love what MITRE talks about with a threat informed defense. So, who's attacking people in my industry, in my geography? How are they doing so? And what do I need to do to prevent those particular types of attacks? Uh, and so getting much more focused instead of broad brushing, we need all of these tools. We need to write our own detection rules for everything. No one can scale. Even the biggest organizations can't scale. So the more focused you are up front, the more you're trying to prevent incidents, the better. Easier said than done, but I am seeing the pendulum
Right.
swing that way.
Back to basics as far as risk management,
What's
identifying your
old is
risks
new again,
correctly.
Cailin. But it's true, and
Hmm.
ridiculously hard now because of all of the
Yeah.
size of the attack surface, the changes that are happening all the time. We're bringing in new
Hmm.
technologies, really, really hard. But that's the CISO challenge: is to go to the board, go to the executives, and say, "Look, you want to use these technologies? There are risks associated with that. My job is to tell you about those
Mm-hmm.
risks, tell you how to mitigate those risks or transfer the risk. Your job is to tell me what to do in that situation. And by the way, if you tell me don't do anything, I'm out the door. That's
Right.
right.
Here's my letter. It's like,
Yep.
what was that saying? The first thing you should do is when you get a job as a CISO is write
I
3
was going to say the
letters.
first thing you should do is update your resume.
Right.
Oh,
Well, I
okay.
think that's the second thing. That's funny. So
I think
go ahead, Kaylin.
I was gonna say that last year I conducted a BIA at my company. I feel like a lot of companies don't do a BIA, and that's what's gonna inform where you need to focus your security efforts. So I highly
Define
suggest, even
BIA
if
for the
it's
audience.
I did like a, oh yes, business impact analysis. Um, Even if it's a small scale, like I did because we're a small company, you don't have to do like the whole huge thing all at once. Just identify what areas and what business processes are most critical and start there.
Absolutely. I mean, again,
Yeah.
no one can cover all the bases, so you have to focus on your priorities, and that's why you do a BIA.
I think some are intimidated by that process.
Mm.
And there's a couple of reasons, right? Business impact analysis. Oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying to somebody who sits and just looks at packets all day. Think about that, right? They have to get out and talk to the business because that's the other thing that drives me crazy is those people who do a business impact analysis, a BIA, without talking to the business. It's like, are you serious? How can you do that? But they do, especially folks over in that sister brother profession called IT. We know where all those important systems are, but do you really, have you really sat down and do you reassess that with the business? You have that conversation. So I think one of the things preventing that from happening is people don't understand A, how to do it, B, that it doesn't have to be a big huge exercise, and C, the value both from the business perspective and the tech perspective. They don't understand the value because they haven't done it
Yeah,
before.
and here's
So
the current situation, the current reality is the reason why you have to do that is because the systems that support those critical business functions are getting more and more complex. They're they're using microservices. They're
yeah.
querying APIs. They're using data. They'll use AI.
Mhm.
Really, really complex. And so if I don't know what the priority for the company is, I can't identify those systems. And I need to identify those systems to understand all of the components of those systems that could
Mhm.
lead to some kind of cybersecurity incident. Without those two working hand in hand, you are just flying blind.
So could that be why there's so much shadow IT AI? Because they're not talking to the business to find out what are you using? What tools are you using?
I think that's part
Nah.
of it. I mean, AI is the shiny new object now, and it will
Yes.
do
Yes.
wonderful things for businesses in terms of cost reduction, in
Hmm.
terms of automation, customer service, all of those things. Absolutely. But there's risks associated with that. And again, we're flying blind if the organization doesn't have a framework where the business, the development, and the security are working hand in hand, problems are coming.
Right. 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 I mean,
Pay me now or pay
there's
me
so much
later.
talk
Remember
about,
that?
right. There's so much talk right now about AI governance, and nobody really even knows what that means. And I'm getting ready for my next campaign and soapbox, and that's around: are we really looking to secure AI, or are we really looking to secure the data? Think
I
about
would say
that,
both, but
because
that's probably a topic for another podcast sometime.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. In closing, John, what are your final thoughts about our profession? Where are we going? What can we do to make it better? And is it really is the sky really
Well,
falling?
the sky's been falling for years, so I was the cybersecurity skill shortage. I think there's a lot of chicken littles out there with the cybersecurity skill shortage. There are some underlying foundational issues with companies and how they recruit and how they write job requisitions and
Hmm.
job descriptions that need to be fixed. But there's no denying that there is a skill shortage, and the skill shortage will only become more acute because of all of this technology proliferation. So
Right.
I think that the project is important. I won't be involved anymore. You're not involved anymore, but I think ISSA is hopeful to continue the project. Um, but the cybersecurity community at large should have its finger on the pulse of the professionals, and that is understanding what they want as a vendor. It's understanding how they're working and how they're thriving as a employer. Uh, it's understanding
Mhm.
societally, do we need to invest in more cybersecurity education, and then in what areas? It's some type of marriage or some type of integration of the cybersecurity skilled people who want jobs and those that want to hire.
Mhm.
There's the middle part of that formula is pretty broken. So I think it's really important. I'm an optimist, so I'm hopeful. There are a lot of people that want to get into the profession, and so we need them. So I'm hopeful that we will make incremental progress. No one's going to solve this overnight, but there's awareness and there should be some help.
Great. I appreciate that very much. Kaylin, any final thoughts?
I'm gonna be the one to solve
There
it
you go.
all. I'm gonna
Solve it all.
solve it all.
Well, I
Just
will
kidding.
say
But
this: it ain't going to be technology that solves this. It's and we the
No.
cybersecurity
no.
profession is way too focused on the next new innovation, and there's a lot of money pushing those innovations through the VCs and the private equity firms.
No.
No, this is people, process, and technology. No way around it. Got to do it.
Yes.
Right. Well, thank you very much, John. As always, it's been absolutely enlightening, and I always appreciate talking with you. So, thank you so much for joining us on our little podcast
Well, my
here.
pleasure. And
Appreciate it.
Cailin, it's really nice to have the next generation in the Candy Johnny show. So thanks for.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time as well, and I just need to find my John now.
He's out there. He or she can be a woman too, but
Any,
yeah, you'll find him.
that's true.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, I guess I will end it with don't forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up, and share this with your friends if you find it interesting. We always want to hear any comments you have, any questions you have. And yeah, Candy, you want to do the sign off?
Yeah. So, again, thank you very much. Until next time, stay secure, stay refined, and
Don't be afraid to get a little bit feral.
great. Thank you.